Hello and welcome to GM Tips, the show where my friends and I share with you our thoughts and suggestions on how to game master your role-playing game. I'm your host, Satine Phoenix, co-creator of Maze Arcana and a guild adept for Dungeons & Dragons. Today's theme is the beauty of limitations. Gaming, planning, big picture, epic stories, weeks of preparation. We've covered all that. Breaking rules, one-shot supplements, and random generators? Yeah, we've talked about that too. Today, we have Sax Carr on the show discussing one-page games. But first, I want to talk with you a bit about my process behind making and playing these kind of games from mostly a GM's point of view, but there's also stuff for players in here too. Tip number 1, minimalism and the creative process. One of the things you learn in art school is how beneficial limitations are. Your teacher says, use these colors, this material, this time frame, and this theme. Suddenly, the possibilities of what you can make are lessened, which is amazing because you can focus your creativity on those few items. Without limitations, some storytellers get choice paralysis or go off on tangents. Limiting choices allows you to communicate more efficiently. Things like story are more clear. I like to use this in my adventures. Players will overthink everything. Simplifying takes my prep time down as well. Let the players do a lot of the brain work. I know that a pastry on the table is just a pastry. The players think of all the horrible possibilities this pastry can be because their imagination is already at work. Tip number 2, improv. We talk about this a lot, but it's more than just a skill actors work on. Improv is about responding to other people's actions. In improv, everyone listens to one another. In relation to playing at a table, it's not just the game master listening to their players, or the players listening to their game master, it's everyone listening and reacting and participating with each other. In the GM Improv panel at Gen Con, we played characters based on 3 or 4 items given to us on the spot: class, race, proficiency, and flaw. We weren't playing a specific fantasy game, and yet we all understood each other. Stripped down, the game was played with a d20, and the game master told the player when to roll based on what the GM thought was important. We all had a lot of fun, even though the game master had 1 minute max to read the entire scenario. Tip number 3, knowledge is power. For players, when you understand your character, you're better able to respond to others. You can have tons of backstory or a basic character sheet, but know how to navigate your character sheet. Know your actions, your reaction, bonus actions well, and you'll not only be able to respond to the scenarios your game master throws at you, but you'll also respond to what your fellow players are doing. Make a cheat sheet if that helps you react faster. Color coding or using index cards to make your modifiers and damage easier to see is welcomed. You're in a game with other players. Play with them as well as the game master. For GMs, you don't have to know the whole world and memorize all the NPCs. The players don't know what you don't know. That's an advantage you have. Trust yourself. I repeat, trust yourself. Trust that you've played enough games, watched enough movies, read enough books that you have inside of you a well of NPCs, locations, monsters, guides, or taverns to pull from. What's important to me as a GM is everyone has fun and gets a chance to make choices. I'm there to set up a story with a goal. The players choose a direction, and I have the choice to navigate them back on track or play with them based on the ideas they get in the game that I didn't think of. I don't need much to tell a story. Give me a sentence and a couple minutes, and I'll weave you through an experience you'll never forget. I could roll on, but instead, let's talk to the showrunner for Geek and Sundry's Twitch channel, writer and comedian, Sax Carr!
Whoa! Hey! Good to see you, Satine.
Man, it's so good to have you on the show.
We've worked together for, I think, as much as 10 years, 8 years?
10 years.
Yeah.
Actually a long time.
All right.
Geek and Sundry. Your brain is amazing.
I hope so.
I had so much fun with you on the pre-interview.
Thank you.
Talking about one-shots, I think, is really important. Not one-shots, one-page games.
Yeah.
You can actually fit a lot of information on one-page games. I'm looking over there at Honey Heist.
Yeah, this is an RPG. This is all the rules you need. This is all the story. This is everything. Honey Heist in one page, and it was literally handwritten and photocopied. That's how one page it is.
That's beautiful. Before we talk about how many of them there are out there, let's talk about the importance of mechanics and understanding mechanics in order to develop games like this.
Well, there's sort of a threshold that happens when it comes to rules, right? So when I started playing D&D in 6th grade, in 2nd edition, we didn't really understand the rules. But that was a good thing because we didn't think we had to. So at some point, we just rolled dice, and it kind of seemed to make sense. And the game flowed very effectively. But as I grew up and I read more and my collection of D&D books filled shelves, I got so into the rules that I stopped trying to tell the story and started trying to essentially apply rule mechanics in a row.
3.5.
Yeah.
4.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, 4.
And I mean, and you get so caught in the minutia of the rules of the game that you lose sometimes the world that you're in. So sometimes, but it's hard when you've been taught a rule to disregard it.
Yeah.
So understanding what the mechanics are trying to do is the number one key to sort of smooth, effective role playing. And with a one-page RPG, you have one rule. Like, I'll show you my favorite.
Okay.
This is roll for shoes. This is the entire RPG, and it's played with D6s. So these are my lucky D6s. I carry them with me everywhere. They're gravity dice.
What does that mean?
And so they just roll really nice.
May I?
Yeah, please.
I've now cursed your dice.
No. They always do well. They're so these are my lucky D6s. This is an entire RPG you can play with all your friends. 10 friends can play this waiting to get on a plane. It's very effective. And because the mechanics are so small, you're forced to do all the storytelling to sort of make sense of it all. And we can get into the brilliance that is Roll for Shoes later. But when you've pared down an RPG to essentially one role or one concept, like in what is it? All Out of Bubblegum. In the game All Out of Bubblegum, you have a number of gum. If you want to kick ass, you roll more than that. If you want to do anything else, chew gum, you roll less than that. That's the whole game. But
awesome.
You can build incredible stories and play together all night long and go through like 10 six-packs while you're doing it, and it's really fun. But you understand what the mechanics are trying to get you to do. They're adding that little element of chance, and they're sort of pushing things along. So when you go back to D&D, you're like, oh, I get it. I understand what this perception check is doing. It's not just some perfunctory thing that we all do. Perception checks are actually kind of a really cool way for you to pass the ball back to the player.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, when you are asking me what you see in the room and I ask you to roll a perception check, I can also say, what are you looking for? And what do you think might be in this room? And okay, you've rolled your check really high. Oh, now I can go even further with this. And if you take every little mechanic that you're going to use on the regular with any game and you understand how it pushes the story forward, it makes for better play.
So do you like it when you have a big set of rules and some game masters just kind of like, okay, I'm not going to use these. Do you like it?
Well, there's sort of a player opt-in for rules. So when I'm sitting down and I've got a stack of books next to me, I'm sort of telling my players we're going to be playing by the rules. So if you have a special mechanic or if you've worked out some sort of tweak of the rules, and I do it myself, I'm working right now on trying to figure out how to make a Lizard Man wrestler in 5th edition, and I'm going through all the rules to try and make it exactly perfect and exploit every little change and nuance, and wait, if his bite is 1d6, what does that mean? If I'm that kind of player and I'm at that kind of table, I want to be able to do that. But if we sit down and I'm like, all right, here's my notebook, let's play D&D. I'm essentially telling you, the player, I just want to make this fun for you. And I'm definitely the kind of GM that is like, all right, well, you want to jump out of this, you want to jump off this hippogriff, and you want to catch on to this flying balloon, and then you want to jump up in there and you want to fight the kobolds. Yeah, that happens. I don't need to roll that. That's amazing. Like, of course you're going to do that, because if you fell 10,000 feet to your death, the game would be over.
Yeah.
And if you come to your players and say, listen, we all know the rules, they're fun, they're a great guideline, the mechanics make sense, we know what rolling to attack is all about, but at the end of the day, I just want us to all collectively to tell a great story, and I'm not looking to make it about, like, no lawyers here.
Yeah.
Then I think it works.
I think a good way to do that would be if a lot of people have pre-made characters, so if you hand them a fully fleshed out character sheet that you print out multiple pages that says, this is the game we're going to play. Or if you do like Keith Baker, like here's one page and here's a handful of numbers and a couple questions, that's the kind of game we're going to play. So I think that's a really good way to communicate to your players.
Well, I also think that you learn in playing different systems too. So if you're playing D&D all the time and people are all into the D&D rules, then they can get very comfortable being like, well, a fireball does this and here's how it does it. But if you're like, well, let's play 3 other systems in a row and then come back to D&D, that lack of familiarity is going to force them to fall back into story, which is the same thing that a one-page RPG does. You don't have any rules to depend on, so now you've got to tell me why it's cool. Now you have to explain to me why you crack your whip this way, because you're not gonna go back to a couple rules and show me exactly what the result is. We're gonna decide the result together because we have only this to work off of. And for me, when you're trying to get the games that feel most epic are often the ones where at the end, if you said, "Hey, wait, which rule mechanics did we use today?" and everyone goes, "Oh, I don't remember."
Nice.
Yeah, like did we open the book? Did we not open the book? Who knows? That's the game you want to be in. That's the one that feels like you've suddenly written a movie together. Those are the ones that you try to explain to your friends and they can't get it because they weren't there.
Yeah.
Those are the ones where you lose track of what's happening. And if you know the mechanics really well, like if you know D&D 5th edition, absolutely every basic mechanic in the player's handbook, it can almost fade away and you'll never know.
Yeah.
And a one-page RPG is easy. It's 2 rules or 1 rule or 3 rules. D&D is a little bit harder, but if you're like looking at something like, I don't know, Riffs, like that's never going to let you be in that place.
Yeah. So the cool thing about these is the mechanics are simple. The story, you can navigate them through. Mm-hmm. But there's not a lot of lore. I mean, I'm looking at all the pages you have here with like 12 games and there's like, what, 12 pages?
Yeah.
Something
Well,
there?
there are one-page RPGs, and here's a couple of examples. So here's Honey Heist, where you're bears and you're robbing HoneyCon 2017. Here's Big Mother Effing Crab Truckers, where you're truckers and you're crabs. This is Tactical Waifu, one of my favorites. This is where you're Japanese schoolgirls, and the hottest boy in school got kidnapped, and you're going to go rescue him with some machine guns. This one is Everyone is John, where you're all the personalities inside a person's head, and you fight for the control of one body. Swords and Scrolls is kind of like a mini D&D, which is kind of nice. It's very simple. I think it's probably borrowed art. I hope they licensed that. And then here is this is Lasers and Feelings, which is basically Star Trek the RPG in one page. And then this is All Out of Bubblegum, which we talked about earlier, which is basically kicking ass and chewing gum in just one set of rules. None of these really have a lot of lore around them. You're sort of forced to build the world around them. But there are also rules light, lore heavy RPGs, which are, it's a whole book of the world, and then the last page is literally like, and here's how you play the game, I guess, if you want to, another one that is sort of fun mechanics is like Goblin Quest. Goblin Quest is a whole book, and where each person plays 5 goblins, because goblins are so death prone that any mistake you die. Yeah. So you have to have 5, and that's a big book and has a lot of lore and it has a lot of alternate rules and everything. But it's basically the same mechanic. It's 1 page at the end of the day.
Oh, interesting.
And you can even look at stuff like Fiasco. Fiasco is essentially a rules simple, world heavy RPG. It may not be in a page, but it works kind of like that. And so you have to build the world around them, which is great too, because you can play All Out of Bubblegum. You can play All Out of Bubblegum like in a sort of them scenario, like the movie it's clearly based on. It's a zombie RPG, it's a space RPG, it's a bunch of kids sort of Stranger Things style. It's you're all on a plane that just got hijacked. Like whatever you want to do, All Out of Bubblegum is there because the rules are the rules.
Yeah, but are you making it all up, or how do you allow the players to be involved in that?
Well, I always like to imagine all role play as collective storytelling. And with, when you look at someone like Matt Mercer and the amazing world he builds around it, it's hard to see exactly where the collectiveness of that storytelling is. It's definitely there. It's the same percentage. Those players are adjusting that story the same way that he is. He just has the pretty words. But every time he says, how do you want to do this? He's asking them to contribute to the story, essentially, right? So in a 1-page RPG, you literally can just say, okay, what do you pick up in this room? And they can pick up whatever they want because they just say it's there. You know what I mean? And so you basically give the player a little more agency, and it allows them to develop the universe around them. Or like with Dick and Johnson, the show that we play here on Geek and Sundry, where we use the All Out of Bubblegum rules, I let those 2 characters literally dictate anything. So I'm like, how do you want to get from here to Washington, D.C.? And if they say we tie 8 fan boats together, then that's definitely how it works. That game's a comedy, but you can do the same thing in a more serious RPG. When you say we did an RPG in Roll for Shoes. It was a one-off Roll for Shoes game that we played with the cast of Eric's TBD RPG, and it was kind of a Stranger Things It sort of thing. So I'm like, all right, which kids are you? How you're all kids. Where do you live? What's going on? What's in your house? And they told me their whole stories around them. And in that, they basically had a lot of control. Because if they're like, oh, well, I'm a sports champion, well, then okay, sure. Now your character can do all those things. And now you have all that equipment. Or if they said, well, my dad's a cop. Well, now there's a gun in that house. You know what I mean? But if they said the same thing, like if at the very beginning they're like, well, I'm pretty sure my parents own a gun. Can I go get it? Then, yep. Sure. It's not for me to tell you the universe if we're playing on a 2x5 card. You know? Or a 3x5 card, like the standard people use. Never mind.
That's actually interesting, allowing the players to really build the world because you're there to facilitate their fun. And these are all so playful. Like these stories don't seem serious at all, like these one-pagers.
They can be. It's interesting. The mechanics certainly don't need to be you can facilitate any kind of game people want to play, and I can tell a lot of stories about very simple RPGs, but they tend to be more fun. They tend to be more casual. I actually think that they're sort of a Steam release for role players who get like real serious.
Yeah.
You know, you've just raided the zombie keep for the 90th time and you keep losing, or you're having trouble finding that table of players you like. I want to play an RPG where I just have fun.
Yeah.
That's kind of what these can be, but they can be serious, and you can really craft great, incredible stories. You know what actually is essentially could be considered a one-page RPG with a lot of lore? Dread. It's one mechanic. It's just the Dread Tower, and everything else.
Scary.
Yeah, and of course, and in that, by creating your characters and saying what you're doing and creating your backstory, you're telling the story back to the game master. And so, like that's a very serious experience. So there's a lot of ways that you can go in any direction, but it's really about saying, okay, what is in the room with you that you want to use? I want to use it this way. Of course you can. Where do you want to go with it? Of course you can go there. It's a lot of saying yes. It's a lot of crafting stories, but also being ready to take what they give you and build that universe.
Go this way, and then this way, and then this way.
The goal is to be a lot less like those early video games where as you walked into a room, you would like see the white cells around you slowly fading into the actual background as they loaded in. Like you want to try and load quick, you want to get ahead of them, but you also want to let them go wherever they want.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Go ahead.
What is your pregame house rule like?
All right. Well, it depends on the system, obviously, which I'm sure I'm not the first DM to say that. But my number one thing when it comes to like pre-prepping players, my house rule is usually that I want people to do everything as much as they can in character, if they possibly can, because I think that's how you get lost in games. So, and some people are not willing to at all. And they're like, my character who is on this sheet does the thing that I'm telling you, and I'm going to roll dice, and that's fine. I'll play with that person for the rest of my life and never be upset. But if you can see, like, I jump on the table and I grab the thing, and like, you know, and I remember once we played together with Chloe Dykstra and Zach and whatnot.
The thing.
Yeah, we went to like 360 thing,
Yeah.
and it was a great game. And like the second it went to my character for the first like RP moment, and I dropped into character, you could see everyone be like, "Oh, this is where we're at."
Yeah.
And what I try to do is do that with the characters, with the players right away. I'm like, yeah, be your character, show us your character. If you're a lizard man, talk like a lizard man. Let's do it. Let's have fun. And the more they get into it, I'm building epic stories for the bar after the game, and the number one way to do that is say, just be your character.
Nice. Question number 2. Favorite GM moment?
Well, this is actually one that people can look up. I played Roll for Shoes. Roll for Shoes is a really interesting system in that you start with one stat. You start with do anything, 1. And if you roll a 6 with doing whatever you did, you get that stat. So if you're climbing a fence and you roll a 6, you get climb fence 1. And so then you roll 2 dice to climb fences, and so on and so forth. It's climb fence 2, whatever. And then if you climb a fence again and roll a 6, then you can get over barbed wire 3. And so your character basically builds in a weird way. Like your character develops out around you. You have to play it to sort of understand it. And I played it with a bunch of really cool role players. It was that same sort of Stranger Things parody, if you will, that we did on an Eric's TBD RPG. And normally in that game, people travel, your character forces you into being very weird because you roll a bunch of dice and you end up being like, I am Susan of the Flaming Beard, and you're like, God, wow, how did this happen? But in this one, it got serious, it got interesting, it got compelling, and we had these 4 kids trapped in a house with a terrible monster, and there was a coming out story, and there were having these emotional turns, and 2 characters kind of fell for each other, and then after we wrapped it up and sort of dealt with the monster, I let them sort of say, where do you kids end up? And just hearing them take what we had just essentially made together with no prep and build these epic stories of growing up together, I was like, okay, I get it now. I get how this card can be the most powerful roleplay tool I have. And that's on the VOD on Twitch. You can check it out if you want to. And you can watch these characters get scared and whatever. And again, they're playing with a pile of D6s and some weird ideas. And a special mechanic I developed called Kid Logic, which allowed them to basically do anything as long as it would make sense to kids.
That's awesome.
And it was one of the best games I've ever played.
Cool. Question number 3. quick tip to the audience.
Pass the ball. As a DM, I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of trying to paint the world as much as you can, trying to explain everything that's going on. I try and give it back to the players every chance I can. Anytime I can let them tell me what's going on, I want them to do it. I know Keith Baker talks about how he, asked them, tell me which zombie is in this horde. I'm the same way. I want if the players have handed you the agency, hand it back to them. It's their world to build, and you're just facilitating it, and it will always be a better game. And at the end of the day, no one's going to accuse you of not having done the work.
Yeah.
Because passing that ball can be hard sometimes. Getting characters out of their shell can be hard sometimes. But every time the players are like, okay, what's in this room? Just sort of as best you can without being a jerk, look back at them and say, I don't know, what is in this room? And it will make a better story.
That's our show for today. Thank you, Sax, for coming all the way down here.
Yes, to my office.
From your home. Where can we find you on the internet aside from Geek and Sundry?
Well, the best place is probably Saving Throw Show, which is another Twitch channel I used to be on. I did Phoenix Dawn Command there for 2 seasons. Well, for 1 season and sort of produced the next. Check it out. It's really worth it.
Cool. As always, I'm Satine Phoenix at Satine Phoenix. You can ask me GM tip questions at #AskSatine and find me every Sunday at noon on Maze Arcana's Orphan Echo on twitch.tv/Maze Arcana and every Tuesday night Dungeon Mastering on twitch.tv/D&D. Thank you so much for watching us here on Geek and Sundry. See you next time. Except for you. Would you please GM us out of here?
Okay. Let's make your honey heist bear.
Yes.
You're gonna need one of my lucky D6s, and go ahead and roll that once. You are an incompetent, roll that one more time. You are an incompetent black bear.
Yeah.
And now you're gonna roll this D8. Who is wearing a flat cap. Oh, like mine.
Oh.
And also, I'll roll this one for you. You are the thief. All right, so from there, we can build the whole world of teams, and Honeycon has no idea what's gonna hit it. So let's get started, and you can roll your bears at home, and we'll see what we can do. We're gonna steal that honey.